Well then, good morning everyone. Welcome along to Sunrise Daily. I'm Chamberlain. What's up?
We're back again this beautiful Tuesday morning. I'm Kaide Kikelu.
Good morning and welcome. I'm Ayo Makinde.
So, what? Back like we never left? Okay.
Well,
all right. Well, speaking about measures, well, first of all, unfortunately, there was another attack in Agatu, Benue, yesterday, and you thought, oh dear. We were just talking about what transpired, unfortunately, in Oyo State. And then you have this one. So it just gives you, just listening and watching, especially if you've been exposed or heard a lot of those kind of news time and again, there's so many questions that come to mind concerning what is being done. Are people looking the other way? Is it deliberate? Why can't it stop? Why are those arrested?
My fear on this, Chamberlain, is that it's almost coming to that, point where it's like we are, and God forbid, we have a feeling of numbness when we hear such unfortunate news. For instance, the kidnapping in Niger State. How frequently have we talked about it? And that came after, was it the one in, I forgot the one that came before that one, when the students of that university were just recently released. And then that one happened in Niger State. And it was like, okay, just for you to know, and then we went back to other issues. So I fear, God forbid, that they would come when we would be numb to such insecurity.
Look, it's come to the time where, as I said, the time is that even in Lagos, there are several reports of people who have been kidnapped. And you ask yourself, whoa, okay, wait a minute, we need to adjust things. Yes, you need to adjust the way you do things normally. You don't take things for granted just because you thought that the news you heard, it's a distance away. No, it's not just that way. And that's why, anyway, look at this one, because it was yesterday. There are mixed feelings about it. They don't know how to internalize it. Okay, how do people process it? Because before you know what, it's just right there in your face where this is a security measure being considered by the police authorities to stem the tide of crime. And so, issuance of spy vehicle number plates, tinted glass permits to unauthorized individuals by the Inspector General of Police. So he's announced that. And then he also did say that was yesterday when they had that meeting with senior police officers. And then he also says he directed all roadblocks be dismantled and replaced with safer highway motorized patrol system. So, well, clearly, anyone who can remember will know that it's not the first time you hear this kind of announcement by an IGP. You had several. And then now you've got this one. But the thing about this one, some clarity seems to be confused to certain people if they say, okay, well, does it mean there'll be no roadblocks? If there will be, what form? Is it motorized? Or all of this terminology. And then the tinted glasses. Those who say, well, much as they may understand and appreciate what they're trying to do to secure lives and property, but cars came with this factory fitted. What do they do now? So if they say they stop the issuance, it means that the police will stop you and check if you have the original ones, or are they supposed to, okay, well, stop all checks until they resume the issuance and verify who's got what, or if you have factory fitted cars or vehicles with tinted permit, you don't use it without the tinted permit. So, doesn't it just give the police authority, those out there, permission to, or they just stop you and, you know what I'm saying?
Well, if
I know what you're saying.
This order really is, like you said, we've heard it time and again. In fact, some IGPs that probably gave this order twice during their tenure. And for some, it seems like, okay, we get to hear this from time to time. But this is, the first major meeting that the new IGP will have with, police heads across the country. So, as they say, is this hitting the ground running, that expression? But when you take a look at the operationalization, you begin to ask a lot of questions. And I think maybe that's where we need to do some more work so that people know what to expect. I imagine that the police know how to act, or at least this will be well communicated to the policemen on the streets who will carry out these orders. It's not the IGP that will be on the streets to carry out these orders. So I expect that these orders will be properly communicated to them such that each person knows the boundaries, but then let people also know what to expect, such that they can tell whether this is going, I mean, this handshake is getting to the elbow, as they say. So for me, that is a challenge. It's understandable that, tinted cars sometimes are used to perpetrate crimes. We're talking about kidnapping and the rest. So it's understandable. It makes sense. But I'm looking at a time when one, communication is done properly for everybody. I mean, major stakeholders, so everybody is on board. And also we do more of targeted enforcement. I mean, I have to relate this back to Twitter in some sense. I mean, targeted enforcement, because, I mean, cutting the head as a solution to headache sometimes clearly it doesn't make sense. So I look forward to a time where we can take a look at all the cars that have been registered. So if your plate number, I mean, you don't have to stop people. There are the technologies to see plate numbers. You flag them down and you just read it and say, okay, this car has not been licensed to have tinted glass. I mean, let's look for ways to ensure that enforcements are targeted, so the whole country will not suffer for the sins of few people. I guess that makes sense, right?
Well, cutting the head, to treat the headache might not be a bad idea if you can relocate other organs.
Wow.
just say.
Okay. Wow.
I didn't see that coming.
I mean, if you can relocate the brain, if you can look at the eyes, I mean, you won't have headaches anymore.
Why do I think that has characteristics of a quack doctor?
Oh, I mean, quack doctor is even good. I mean,
doctor talking about the enforcement, that's where the concern is. That's always been the challenge. That's why that IGP you mentioned had to do it twice. The enforcement is usually the issue, because on the one hand, people have, as Chamberlain mentioned, people have, cars that came with, factory-fitted tints. And what's the purpose of the tints? I think that's one thing many people need to understand. It's essentially to cut down the impact of the sun in the vehicles, but many people think it's just is a status thing. Not particularly, because when you are in a car that is factory fitted, the heat of the sun is not as strong. That's one people need to understand. That
the interior is dark.
Is dark and cooler, as opposed to when it's all plain and all of that. So people need to understand that. But you see, when it comes to the enforcement, my mind goes to what Mr. Oshini said yesterday. I think I've referenced it again when we were closing yesterday. That the policeman is already seriously traumatized, and you give him this assignment, and he is under the sun, and all of the issues that he is having to deal with are there facing him. He left them at home. He's going to go back to them when he gets back home, and he's thinking about them while on duty. So what is the modus operandi of obeying the IGP's order? It's one thing to have a law. When we have budget, we also have budgets. What do you call it? You explain the budgets to people and all of that. So
I don't know why I'm talking about budget padding.
I don't know, but that it's very essential that the books be clear as to how to operationalize this order of the IGP. Otherwise, we might be tempted to get back to that police brutality that people feared. Remember what happened, was it at Lekki, where that man was confronting the policeman and, rough handling him, and the man comported himself? How many policemen can comport themselves that way? How does someone whose car is factory fitted explain to a policeman that there is nothing I can do unless I have to break my glass? So it's a long conversation. I want to believe that it's been thought through, and the senior officers will also percolate the conversation to the people who are going to enforce it.
I think it's insightful, or it's important, something you just mentioned. That police officer was actually also honored, as it were, during the meeting yesterday. So I think he was meant to send a message, I believe, to other officers that this is the minimum standard we expect from you.
Yeah, but, all of those communication, which is very key here, because I understand that it's that they said they had reports of abuses. And so it is the issuance of those tinted permits for those vehicles that has been suspended. And note that it's been banned.
But is it understood that way by the policeman on the street?
Well, that's up to the High Command.
Exactly.
To see how they could communicate that message to the rank and file. And then, such that, I mean, just as you highlighted, they're already traumatized, being on the roads, under the weather, the nature of the climb here. Citizens themselves are equally as traumatized.
Absolutely.
Going through, of course, we know that we could do a lot with improving the relationship between the police and the citizens. So that can be done. But whatever it is that can be done to ensure that that is improved is welcome. But with this one, so it's usually a thin line between getting it right and wrong.
Absolutely.
And also a thin line between it just blowing up in everybody's face. Remember, some of them are with weapons. Not many citizens understand gun diplomacy. So when they get out there, it could always escalate. So we're hoping that, will it be a bad idea if they do it twice? If people don't understand. They did it before.
And I'm thinking of a course on gun diplomacy, really, because I think that would be a good short
I
course.
haven't really actually seen that one. I haven't heard that before, so that's some education, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Well, we're hoping that they do these things right, because sometimes on the road they just don't want to know. They just say, no, this is what the IGP has said. No, whereas it's not.
Exactly.
So, well, we'll just go ahead and take a look at what the dailies are reflecting today. Oh dear. So, yeah, take a look at Nigerian Tribune. Twitter ban is still a thing.
Oh, yes.
So, who knows how long more it will be. Nigerians must have free access to self-expression. U.S. envoy. Suspension in national interest. FG tells US, UK, Canada. Uproar as NBC directs broadcast stations to uninstall Twitter handles. Well, I think the word we saw there was deinstall.
Yeah. Which is also a term anyway, but it specifically says you remove a software from a computer. That's what deinstall means.
Not uninstall.
They
we're saying
pretty much mean the same thing.
verbatim,
Yeah.
what we saw.
Deinstall.
So, but I mean, the
So it means
interpretation
removing
here.
the software from hardware computer. So that's deinstall.
Okay.
So, tweeting guaranteed under UN Charter on Human Rights. Adeboye. Our tweets target 5 continents, over 100 nations. Deeper life. So, there you go. Well, we'll try and see if we could get some explanation or some breaking down of some of these things and see how it appears, or how how does this fit in our books, in our law books here. So, I mean, what is a global village now? So, what do we then do? Okay, this is the big lead as you've seen there. So you might as well just go ahead and focus on that one. So, yeah. And then Twitter ban may run us bankrupt. Entrepreneurs. We talked about how much they lost in 2 days, in 3 days. The dailies reflected that so much yesterday. So who knows, today, tomorrow, you might see another one talking about how much they've lost in 4 days, in 5 days, in a week, if it persists.
And don't forget that a lot of people actually had to sort of migrate to Twitter and the rest during COVID.
Yeah.
As a means of survival,
Working from home
basically,
and all those things.
So at a time they thought, okay, we found some succor.
Bam! Right on your faces.
So will there be some sort of palliative for them in the coming days?
What? Palliative for the ban?
Would that be
Suspension?
I mean, for those who are losing from this, really, because people are actually losing. I know people that, they sell, they do business there on a daily.
I saw that headline on a good number of papers yesterday, tracking, of course, we also saw it here, the amount of money that's already been lost and the amount of money that may be lost in 30 days if this persists.
I hope they'll be able to situate some of these things, because ultimately it will have its impact on the man out there on the street. If that is where their businesses is being run, what do you expect those kind of people to do? That's Tribune today.
Oh, take a look at Vanguard newspaper, the lead story, Twitter. Yeah. Free expression vital, US, UK, EU, tell FG. We remain firm in our position. US, EU, UK, Canada, Norway, Ireland insist. FG gives condition to lift ban on Twitter. Even though a statement came afterwards saying, well, it wasn't quite a condition, but you know what? Let me take more riders. Adeboye defies Twitter ban, says tweeting is within UN Charter on Human Rights. That's the front page right there. And Deeper Life tweets from across the world. Kumuyi, FG could have handled it a lot better, says Sanwo-Olu. MIPC threatened to lodge complaints before AUUN, but there's more riders. Stop using Twitter. FG orders broadcast media. But take a look at what 22 CSOs say. We'll continue tweeting. Yeah, that's what they say. It's on page 5 of Vanguard newspaper this morning. So clearly, the end has not been heard or tweeted or whatever term you want to use on this one.
Especially if you're tweeting from abroad.
You know, it's on page 5 of the Vanguard newspaper. And there's just something right under that one. You see, June 12, IGP reads Riot Act to zonal AIGs command CPs. So, sure, wondering, June 12, I mean, how does that work? But more details on page 8. Let me just take one more. Southeast Security, disquiet as Ibubago chair, General Umai, quits. It's on page 7, so that caused quite a conversation or a debate. But, I mean, going through the reasons he gave, I mean, well, definitely people will read different interpretations. But quickly, back page sports. We won't lose a second time. Musa, yeah, there's a match today. Kickoff is 4 p.m. Okay, no problem.
Eagles versus Lions. We'll see.
All about respecting the opponents. If you say you won't lose a second time.
I wonder.
Wow.
Okay. But we're all behind them, definitely.
Have you also suspended Mr. or Mrs.? Don't answer. Daily Trust newspaper this morning. Secession agitations. Northern elders flay Igbo leaders. Lack of consensus. That's the lead there. A few riders. Ekweremadu, Ngige, Onu, Okorocha. Others silent. Arsonists' assailants not different from Boko Haram, says Shoyinka. We've always denounced violence, Ohaneze says. Abaribe condemns attacks. Ezekwesili, others blame Buhari. The story is the lead on the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper. France imposes $267 million fine on Google. Stories on page 17. Is that a ban on Google?
No, it's a fine.
It's just a fine.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, on the other side, we're talking about the losses. Twitter suspension takes toll on brands and businesses. Stories on page 16.
Now that's the ban right there.
That's the ban.
Yeah.
Anyway, those pictures you see on the front page are tied to the story, in black. The headline in black right under them. 7 years after, Borno commissions remodeled Chibok School. And guess what? The story is on page 7. Repackaged Moi Moi, Kuli Kuli, NDE tells graduates. That story is on page 18. Marpe.
Except that now you probably won't be able to sell it on Twitter.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you're not trying to find out if I've downloaded VPN. Well, let's look at what New Telegraph has on the front page for you guys. Look at this. 2023, North plans to impose presidential aspirants on South. That's what's on the front page of New Telegraph this morning. Shops for credible candidates in APC, PDP. 2 ministers penciled down. That's also on the front page. Adeboye Kumuyi continue tweeting. Say churches are global institutions. El Rufai, Makinde, other top personalities defy federal government's ban. Banks suspend Twitter support for products. Resolve your differences with microblogging site GoCup. I don't know who GoCup is, but GoCup tells Buhari. That's also on the front page of New Telegraph. You have a number of other stories there. Insecurity, manufacturers groan as insurance escort budgets rise. Dangote, Bois, flour mills fret over attacks, losses. It's all on the front page. And you have a number of other stories just beneath the nameplate. And this one, Nigeria Bureau of Statistics, Nigeria's trade deficit deepens on rising imports. So all of this policies geared towards ensuring that we produce locally. What is happening? Is anyone monitoring, all the investments we're making in trying to ensure that we have import substitution back home? What is going on? I don't know. But page 3 will give you what the Nigeria Bureau of Statistics is saying over rising imports. You also have this one, vandalism. Federal government to spend 5 trillion naira on damaged bridges. Yeah, that also came up yesterday. Let's leave it there for New Telegraph.
The Guardian newspaper this morning has this one. Adeboye, Kumuyi defend Twitter use as envoys, again reject ban. That's the lead of the Guardian newspaper this morning. Government seeks understanding, gives condition to lift ban in meeting with envoys. NBC directs broadcast stations to delete unpatriotic Twitter. And there's a response to that. Asking TV radio stations to deactivate Twitter accounts is unlawful, says Serap. And NUJ Open seek immediate lifting of ban. All of that packed on the front page of the Guardian newspaper this morning.
Well, for the Nigerian News Direct, the lead story is on Twitter. Adeboye, Kumuyi, others defy FG on Twitter ban. It's on page 4. Twitter suspends Facebook's owner account for attacking Buhari. Okay. Really? And NBC directs all TV radio stations to deactivate Twitter handle. Ban violators will know their offense in court. That's according to the FG. So you find more on page 4. But that Twitter suspends Facebook's owner account for attacking Buhari. Okay, I didn't see that. But some other stories, you see, suspected killer herdsmen strike again. But this time in Ogun, kill 3. And let me just take one more. DSS summons Mbaka to Abuja. That one's on page 2. You wonder for what? Well, you might find out in the coming days. But let's leave it there for Nigerian News Direct. Markwe.
Rivalry among security agencies for worsening insecurity. That's also on the front page. PMB calls for synergy as Sultan warns leaders against misrule. We can't afford another civil war. That's from Northern Elders. Herders kill 33 in Benue, Ogun. Human life now cheap in Nigeria. That's from Atiku. You have a number of other stories just at the bottom here. US-UK meets federal government, maintains stance on Twitter ban. Online publishers, Deeper Life, Redeem Church, others demand immediate reversal as NBC directs broadcast stations to uninstall Twitter handles. You'll find also this one. NLC, ASU, protest sack of Kaduna Varsity lecturers. And then you see here, OPEC members lost $1 trillion to price plunge in 2 years. That's from Barkindo. A number of other stories right here, but you might want to do that yourself. Look at this one. 17 died, 13 injured in Niger auto crash. I don't know. A lot of stories on the front page this morning. A lot to make comments on, but hey, it's your opinion that counts. And if Twitter has been banned, we have to commend our viewers for being persistent, using all the other handles that they can find. We received a lot of your mails, and hopefully, you can send us some of your reactions too. Hopefully, we'll take them in the course of the program on what you make of what's going on the front pages, especially the reactions you're seeing to the ban on Twitter and other stories that might pique your interest. Let's leave it there for leadership newspapers.
Well, yes, indeed. And take a look at Blueprint next then. Looming civil war must be averted at all costs, NEF tells FG. Warns on weakening capacity to deal with threats. Alleges conspiracy in Southeast killings. General Umahi resigns headship of Ibibagu over funding. So you got that one. 40 killed in fresh attacks on Agatu. So unfortunately, these are lives being lost, and it's not even making lead stories in some of the dailies. But again, unfortunately, this is happening. The writer here says, fleeing gunmen kill 3 troops, repel attacks on Kaduna Zaria Highway. So there you go. That is it with a look at some of the dailies here today. We're back in a moment. Don't go away.
We want to use social media for good. There's a lot of good that can come out of this communication revolution that we have in the world today, for a lot of very, very good things. And we want, as much as possible as a government, that these platforms and these media should be used for good. And I think that part of the conversations with them will be really towards how to get them really as forces for good, global good. Conditions, the basic condition is really responsible communication. You know, we know the power of words, you know, and power of words for good and power of words for bad. And we really, our condition is really that these, you know, when you have that kind of power to manage and facilitate the communication of billions of people around the world, it has to come with responsibilities. Absolutely has to come with responsibilities. And so we want to, if the conditions would be responsible use of media.
But we remain firm in our position that free access to the ability to express oneself is actually very important, and perhaps even more important in troubled times. And so we're glad to hear that they're interacting with Twitter. I will share with you on the question of judicial processes. I will share with you that topic, the topic of the judiciary and judicial processes in Nigeria, came up. And you know, many of the things that His Excellency the Minister is referring to, such as inciting or committing violence, are crimes, and which the government of Nigeria has a legitimate interest in identifying and prosecuting those who commit such crimes, and that we think that we encourage that to use judicial processes within the scope of respect for human rights and the rule of law to constrain that sort of behavior. I think we have to be very clear that we are Nigeria's strong partners on issues of security, and we recognize the daunting times and the array of security challenges that confront Nigeria.
All right, so there you go. We're going to go ahead now. We're joined by Mrs. Florence Ezenwa, who is the CEO of Ocean Serve and also a retired director with the Ministry of Transport. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today on the program. Okay, I guess we'll take a little time and sort that out, and we'll be back with you. All right, welcome back. Well, don't forget, you can send us your response or what you make of all of this that is going on. We'll have our email account, sunrisedaily@channelstv.com. You are always welcome to do that anytime, even at the dead of the night, actually.
Oh, yeah, we actually got some mails at the usual time.
Yeah. And we will read as much as we can, yeah. So now we can bring in Mrs. Florence Ezenwa, who is the CEO of Liluk, and retired director with the Ministry of Transport. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on the program today.
Good morning.
Well, a lot is happening, well, sometimes quick and fast, and several meetings have happened, and perhaps there will be a lot. But in the dailies yesterday, there were lots of responses and reports about how much this is costing the country, this suspension, as it were. So give us your impression of what you make of all of this, particularly about this suspension of Twitter in Nigeria.
Well, thank you very much for having me here. A lot has really, like you said, happened in the past few months in the life of this nation. But it seems that the action of the past 1 week has really snowballed into some kind of mass agitation and unrest, because largely the social media is what our new generation and the business community knows. And when you talk about banning it, it's like you're shutting down Nigeria from the rest of the world. So I think it's part of a human right to have a freedom of expression. So I think it needs to be properly managed.
When you say it needs to be properly managed, what do you have in mind in terms of what needs to be done and by who?
I think by all the stakeholders, by government, by the citizens themselves, by the social media handlers, by everyone, because I think it's the manner of approach and the use of language and insensitivity. It's a lot of things, actually.
Do you share the view of some of those who think that they feel alienated from, just as you say, they seem to have shut off the young generation from certain things going on in this country? Some have expanded on that school of thought, thinking, well, it appears as though it's us and them. They seem not to, perhaps, those up there don't have an understanding of how to get across with the rest of the country, and as such, this is what you see going on.
It's not so much about us and them. It's so much about how we treat one another, especially through the social media. Social media is good, social media is bad. So we really need to manage it. The people in the press, broadcasts, commission, Ministry of Information, government, everyone needs to know how to use the social media. You can use it to destroy, you can use it to build. I think we really need to manage it. Take the good and drop the bad, yes? That's what I think.
But one of the things that comes to mind in all of this, as you have said, social media is pretty much like everything we use. It can be used for good and it can be used for bad. Unfortunately, what we are talking about here is pretty much communication in summary. And you have also talked about the process of communicating with each other. Now, clearly, as you said earlier, there is that disconnect between the young population and a good number of people who are in leadership. That understanding seems to be lacking. How do you suggest we begin to approach that? Because clearly there are historical antecedents that we do not want to go back to. But the way things are now, if someone feels alienated, it's only natural for the person to react and want to do something about it. So how do you suggest we begin to engage with these people that you say are alienated, so that we do not repeat, history that we don't want?
Thank you very much. I've always believed that this Nigeria is very much an adult society. We really do not respect the youthful population of this country. We do not care what happens to them. We don't even engage them. So how do you engage them? You catch them young. People are busy pursuing their daily bread. They don't even have time to attend to the needs of the family, the children, the youths. We don't even have parks anymore. Everywhere is built up. Youth centers are no more. They don't even have a place to air their views. So you find that with the advent of social media, this is all they know. They don't even, some don't even go out. They are stuck on their phones. So our culture demands that one person cannot really raise a child or, a community. We have to mix some of our cultural values with the modern advent of communication. We really neglected the youths, and that's why we're having this now. I think we should go back to the drawing board, because I grew up in a place where and when it was valued to be in a family where you are loved, where schools are, where people are really raised. Missionaries are there to support us. How many of those institutions do we have now? We've abandoned a lot of things. It's what we did in the past that is haunting us now. But I think there is hope if we can retrace our steps and try to make amends and try to listen more to the youthful population of this country. We're not listening to them.
Are there things that you think the young population today can learn from the young population of the 60s? Don't also forget that it was in that time that Nigeria went into a kind of upheaval that we don't want repeated. The Civil War, for instance. And many of the people who were in government at the time were young people in their 20s, in their 30s, and all of that. So are there things that you think the youth ought to be aware of now so that we do not go back to that time?
Oh, there are so many things. The youth of today, they're too much in a hurry. I grew up in the 60s, and I suffered in that growing up era because there was a lot of upheaval at the time I was growing up. The sense of entitlement the youths have now, we didn't have it then. We had to work for everything we had. When I lost my father, I had to pay my way through school. I had to become old young. I had to be looking after a family of 7 because I lost my father immediately after the Civil War. At 46, I lost my father, and I became the breadwinner. How many youths are breadwinners now? So, but at that time also, there were opportunities. There were town hall meetings, village meetings, missionaries were there. The missionaries really did a lot for this country. I'm a Catholic, and they did a lot for this country, especially for the youths. They gave us a lot of hope. But what do we have now? We we have a lot of youths running to the churches where they are given hope.
Okay. Well,
Oh, yes. I mean, I just try to situate myself in that period you're talking about. And you mentioned that a lot of young people these days are too much in a hurry. You talked about the sense of of entitlement, as it were, saying, I mean, I deserve this. You need to give this to me, as opposed to then when you had to, work for things. I mean, you have young people also working for things these days. Some of them, not all young people are in a hurry, but you also said we need to retrace our steps. And I think it's in line with just what you were saying. To what point do we need to retrace those steps? Is it to pre-Civil War or when exactly? Where did we miss it, as it were?
We have to take a bit of pre-Civil War. We have to take a bit of post-Civil War. We have to take a bit of now. This is more of a now generation. We were the then generation. The now generation largely are so impatient. And it is also largely because most of us parents don't even have time to attend to our family issues. The desperation to create wealth, to lift yourself out of poverty, has really caused a lot of havoc in value system in Nigeria. So I think we should pick a bit of pre-Civil War, post, and now we should reimagine a new Nigeria where there is inclusivity, because inclusivity is the name of the game all over the world.
I sort of like the sound of that. Pre-Civil War, post-Civil War, and now. Sort of like a custom or hybrid kind of arrangement. But Mokwe has a question, or a few questions for you. Mokwe.
So, Mom, I really at a loss as to where to start, with the questions, because I'm really trying to, go through your mind as to, the phases of life you have had, growing up, maturity, where you currently are right now. And I don't know if you have, the activities or the events in the last few years have brought back memories for you. Because for you to decide that you would like to, speak on these matters on national TV, you must feel really heavy in heart. Maybe, scenes that played themselves in your growing up years are beginning to come up again. I don't know what it is that has sparked in you this urge to want to speak, but do you think that, are there things that you're currently seeing right now which for you spell danger, preceding what Nigeria faced in the late 60s? Are you seeing them again in 2021?
Thank you very much for this very important question. I chose to come here on this invitation because of the passion I have for this nation to be one, and because of the experiences I had during the Civil War. My father, when he was alive, used to tell us, because he experienced the Second World War, he said, he's always saying, Warsaw saw war and was no more. So, we cannot afford to experience a second civil war. I am 70 years old now, and I'm seeing and hearing those drum beats I heard 50 years ago that threw this nation into a deadly civil war. And immediately after that war also, I left this country to go to Canada. And I happened to be in the part of Canada that were agitating for separation, in Montreal, in Quebec. And they had a way of managing all that agitation. They had a referendum. And then, but it hurt that country so badly because the economy of that province went into shambles. So I think we should dialogue. There is need to talk. People should watch what they say at this time because a lot that were said then caused that civil war. And I said, no, I cannot sit and watch a second war. If there is any way I can contribute, which I've been doing as a private sector person since I retired from government, then this might be it. I'm calling on everybody, the old, the young. Please, do not call for war. War is the last option. It will not help anybody. And don't think that you can escape to any country because you might not even live to be able to escape.
I can only imagine the trauma. I mean, if you've been through something before and you're seeing the signs again, I can only imagine the trauma that, you know, whatever it is you're seeing will be evoking. But before now, I mean, preceding the president's comments, which it was seen had sparked, outrage in different quarters for different reasons. Some have justified it. Some have said, no, we disagree with how the president, used his words. But, we cannot run away from the fact that there are secessionist agitations, especially in the southeast of the country. That is on the one hand. Before now, we have a constitutional amendment process also going on. For some people, they have said, no, this is not what we need. What we also want, what we need is a new constitution. And some people say that is room for dialogue. Do you think that that is sufficient room for dialogue? And do you think that the process, are you optimistic that through a constitutional amendment process, we could get what it is that we desire to make us stronger? Or do you think that, as you saw in Canada, perhaps a referendum will be the way to go?
This is a big one. Well, I think the ongoing process of constitutional amendment is the only way out. Everyone has to come to that table so that we can sort things out. All agitators must be invited so that you hear them out. I believe that we have the National Assembly that were duly elected or selected to speak on behalf of their constituents. There is absolutely no need for war. I wouldn't want to stay here if there's going to be another war, even if I have just 24 hours to leave. I'm pleading there should be no war. Most people who are agitating, where are they? Are they here? Are they willing to go to the war front? And speeches made. Everybody is entitled to say what they want to say. Be it the president, be it the agitators. There is freedom of speech. So if there is freedom of speech, and one speech is trying to get us into a civil war, then we should dialogue about that speech. And if there are ways of apologizing or, taking back a few harsh words, We do that.
All right, then. Mrs. Florence Ezenwa, the CEO of LELUC and the former director with the Ministry of Transport, we do thank you very much indeed for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Well, we'll go to break and then we'll return. Mr. Abiodun Uwonikoko, SAN, will join us and give his perspective when we come back in just a moment. Don't go away. All right, so Mr. Abiodun Uwonikoko, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, joins us next to weigh in. Look, there's so many legal questions and clarifications and positions that lots of people want to hear you clarify, if you will. But good morning, and thank you again for joining us today. Now, just as I started, said, initially we did say so much is going on about this, the position that the federal government has taken and their agencies, which we will come to in a while. But give us your impression, your mindset about what is going on so far with this suspension of Twitter by the federal government.
Thank you. It was something we thought was flying a kite when the Minister of Information hinted at this possibility initially. However, it has happened. And unfortunately, I can see that there is lack of interagency harmony in terms of policy formulation and implementation in the present regime now. Why that is so, I cannot say. Otherwise, from what we have seen now, 4 government cabinet members ought to have been carried along in that decision. Information Minister, Office of Attorney General of the Federation, Ministry of Communication and Digital Economy. I emphasize the word digital economy. And the presidency. They ought to have sat down and looked at the wider ramification of the decision they were about to take, including, of course, the foreign minister. Because we are dealing with a medium that has global implications, global connections, and serious impact on the national image. That's why thereafter we have been seeing misconduct since. The Attorney General was reported to have said those who dared to breach the Twitter suspension directive will find out what law they are breaching when they go to court. The Honorable Minister of Information appears to have backtracked, saying that what they have done was not a permanent decision. At the end of it all, the foreign minister has had to be doing damage control, while the most pivotal ministry, under which you have NCC, that has direct mandate to regulate use of the social media through the internet, has actually been very, very quiet. What I've seen here is that we do not seem to understand the basis on which the Twitter business operates. The Twitter business does not provide content. It provides access for content to be broadcast. So when the Twitter handle as M. Buhari was registered, Mr. President was entering into a contract of use with Twitter, not as President of Nigeria, but as an individual just like any other person. Contrast that with what you have with the Twitter handle of the President of the United States of America, which is at POTUS. That is the Twitter handle of the President of America. So when President Trump's access to Twitter as an individual was suspended, it wasn't that of the President of US that was suspended. It was his personal Twitter handle. The item of controversy here was posted under President Muhammadu Buhari's Twitter handle at mbuhari. And what did Twitter do? Twitter, in accordance with their policy, which every subscriber has contracted to abide by, has a right to take down a content that either breaches their Twitter user agreement or their policy, which is an appendix to the agreement when you sign up as you are subscribing. So Twitter did not post a content, but Twitter has a right to edit content if it falls foul of their policy. That's number one point that we got wrong when we took on this matter and said we are suspending Twitter. For what? Twitter did not publish anything. Somebody posted his own information on his Twitter handle, and the owners of the platform, based on their terms of use and policy, find some of the content to be to have run afoul. And so they took down that content. The same way they have done for the President of America, even as a sitting president. A country which actually licensed and incorporated Twitter and will regulate Twitter did not find it necessary, when that was done, to use the power of the state to harass or bully Twitter. Now, this is very worrisome because we have not seen the full ramification of what has happened. It shows to the world that our mantra of respect for rule of law is a charade. If a president or an officer under the office of president feels that the president has been personally embarrassed, then you bring to bear the full force of the state to deal with the aberrant institution, especially one that is not registered, regulated, or incorporated in Nigeria. We are giving the impression that what operates in Nigeria is rule of man rather than rule of law. And this is part of the indices that people look at when they want to come into your country to do business, to transact anything whatsoever. So it was a very bad optic for the country, whether we realize it or not.
All right, now, from what you've said, does that then mean that our position as a country, as a sovereign, doesn't come up here in the sense that you're saying it was the president's personal account, not his account, not the account of the president, the position of the president of Nigeria? Because if that were the case, will we have a case to say, well, the sovereignty of Nigeria, the laws of the country could be in jeopardy if we don't take certain decisions based on some of the things that we've seen published? Where does that come in here?
Now, it comes in where, for instance, the issue is having to do with national interest. And that has to be handled at diplomatic level. It is demeaning for a sovereign to start engaging in a spat with an ordinary company in another foreign country. This should have been taken up diplomatically, assuming this was a national interest issue. You don't engage a whole sovereign with an ordinary company in another country that's subject to FCC's direction, Federal Commission direction, another agency like NCC. The Nigerian government now is now battling with ordinary company, regardless of the size and capitalization of that company. We are demeaning our country. If it is a national issue, then we should have used the diplomatic channel to take that up. Take it up with the American embassy. Then they engage their own. They will not even, America will not go to Twitter. They will go through the agency that has authority to superintend the operation of Twitter. And then something will be done. But we have approached it in a way that looks so puerile, so childish, that we don't project the impression that we are a serious country, that we are, and so this is worrisome. That's the first side. The second point I wanted to make was about the fact that we are no longer living in an age of IT. We are living in an age of IoT, Internet of Things. It's not only human beings now that communicate. Things are programmed to communicate using technology. So when we are focused on just addressing one person's misdemeanor, misuse of Twitter, we are not appreciating the level of technology that is available globally now. Look at what we have seen. After government made this announcement that it's suspending stuff, which they don't have power to do, they have power to restrict access of Nigerians to use of Twitter as a platform, but not suspend Twitter that Nigeria never licensed in the first place, and Nigeria has no power to regulate. If you look at the Constitution of Nigeria, under Section 39, under freedom of expression, the right of access of every citizen to platform for expressing themselves is generally guaranteed. But there are provisions under subsections 39, 2, 3, and 4, where those rights can be abridged. And they can only be abridged in accordance with an act of parliament, not as a matter of regulation or policy or disposition of a government functionary. This also is not the impression we are creating the way we have gone about this problem. Twitter is just a company, just like MTN, Airtel. Why have we elevated to the point where Nigeria is now engaging in diplomatic competition or contest with ordinary company in America? We are reducing our country. The president of Nigeria, if he feels strongly, can take it up with the president of America. Not for Twitter and Nigerian government to be debating about what right, when we don't have no control over his business. So it is therefore my advice that time has come for us to beat a retreat, eat the humble pie, and go about this properly. I'm sure as a responsible corporate citizen in America, Twitter also must have learned a lesson from this. To be fair to government, there has been a number of posts on Twitter that you will expect them to apply the sledgehammer the same way they applied to Mr. President's own post, which didn't appear to have happened. And so government is entitled to feel that there isn't an objectivity in the way Twitter enforces its rules, and it's like Nigeria is targeted. That is a legitimate concern, but we must not correct a wrong with another wrong. Two wrongs do not make a right.
Let me just pick it up from the point which you made earlier about rule of man rather than rule of law, and you spoke about the implications, wide implications, as it were. But from what we've seen so far from the government, it would seem the government is not backing down. I mean, the suspension was issued on Friday. It took effect on Saturday. You saw the Attorney General's statement. You saw statements that came subsequently. You referenced the one from NBC, the Ministry of Information. In fact, the Foreign Affairs Minister also spoke yesterday, and there was another clarification from his ministry saying that, well, they didn't give conditions. But clearly, it would look like the government is not backing down on this. But you say it is time to eat the humble pie, as it were. In what shape, in what manner should that eating, that dining look like?
Thank God, we still have a very robust and professional foreign service. When matters extend beyond our territory, it is the job of our foreign service to manage the fallout. It is not the job of a propaganda machine like the Minister of Information to do that. It's already beyond them because they have escalated the thing beyond their remit. So I hope government appreciates what this implicates. I've read in the paper how much Nigeria is losing on a daily basis on account of this supposed suspension on Twitter. I've said it before and I'm saying it again. Nigeria has no power to suspend Twitter. The power we have is to suspend access of Nigerian users of Twitter to Twitter facilities, to Twitter platform. So you can see already that in terms of terminology, we have adopted the wrong expression. You cannot suspend an organization from operating when you don't have the power to license it to operate. And Nigeria has not licensed Twitter. What they have done was to license communication companies in Nigeria to access Twitter, broadcasting corporations to use the platform of Twitter for the public to access them. So that is what we should have said we were suspending or we were restricting access to. So when you say you are suspending Twitter, you make yourself a laughing stock. This is a digital platform that's operating in the cloud. So I would urge the president at this stage, because this has become a serious matter, if you look at what's happening, it's no longer an issue of north, south, west. It's a matter of generational distrust now. A lot of the younger generation who have managed to develop a new form of economy around the digital technology are feeling done by this decision. Institutions, small businesses that thrive on using the platform of Twitter to drive their businesses, earning daily living, are now grounded because some of them, they attract market and patronage outside of Nigeria, even though they are located here. People use their facilities, PayStack, Flutterwave, all these payment systems, and a host of other IT-dependent businesses that our young people have created in the last 10, 15 years are now suffering just because somebody somewhere in the presidency or in the ministry, cannot develop the thick skin to overlook some things. In any event, let us look at what has happened. Twitter did not even take away the account of Mr. President, unlike what they did to President Trump, who is the president of the country where they are elected to operate. They just took down an aspect of a publication which they believe offended their policy. And so when you sign on to their contract of terms of contract, you are deemed to understand that these are the rules of engagement, which you will abide by. Don't forget, people don't know, the use of Twitter itself for business is free. Nobody pays to be on Twitter. It's only when to make use of their commercials with their business that you pay for it. And by the law that established Twitter, the maximum you can get for damages when they offend their terms of engagement is the amount to pay for using their service. Now, if the service is free, you can't even get to sue them in the court of law. At most, you get maximum of, under their contract, $100. Can you imagine a whole Nigerian sovereign suing Twitter for something like this, and all you can get, which has to be probably in an American court, is $100. It shows you how pedestrian the debate that we are engaging in has been. It's so unfortunate. We have too much to bother us. We have so many challenges that even Twitter is one of the strongest weapons we can use to address. Reaching out to the public at instantaneous time frame with positive information from presidency, from government agencies, is something that Twitter has provided us avenue for. Why can't we harness that for that purpose, rather than be concerned about the other side? If there are more positive information coming from government through Twitter and the negative coming from some harebrained people abroad, with time, those guys who found that Twitter platform is no longer helpful to their cause, they will move, they will migrate, and they will have to succumb that place to government. But government must populate Twitter platform with the positive information that Nigerians are going to be happy to read about. That is the better way than to start engaging in a fruitless battle with Twitter.
Well, there's something you said earlier, Mr. Owonikoko, that in fact, so many things that you said that I would love very much, to get a little more understanding on. For instance, you mentioned the individual of the president as opposed to the institution of the presidency right now. I don't know how many people will be able to internalize that. But there was something you also mentioned about the fact that it's not cultural, it's not ethnic, it's generational. Do you think this understanding is lost or not on the authorities and even the generation that we're talking about? Does it look to you like it's an attack or a deliberate targeting of a particular generation?
I don't think it was deliberate. I believe that the full ramification of the consequence of that decision did not occur to the government functionary until the backlash came. And that's the more reason I'm saying that if we got something wrong, humility is not a vice. Actually, it's a virtue. You build trust when people realize that even when our government gets it wrong, it admits its error and corrects its ways. This is the time to do that. I just recall how much the vice president, in terms of time, spent, I think the year before, going around distributing trader money of 10,000 naira or something to traders all over, just to get people employed. I know how much was voted for this special job thing that Keyamo SAN, Minister of State for Labor. But combine all of that together and aggregate it. It's not up to what the Nigerian younger generation in IT-dependent business have lost in the last 3, 4, 5 days. So if we realize that there is a way to do damage control without government losing face, there has to be engagement. For instance, one of the things I'll propose now, Minister of Communication and Digital Economy should immediately convene a special session with the digital economy space, especially the generation X, to determine what has this cost Nigerians and what are their ideas about how to navigate out of it. If that starts to happen now, that is a constructive move from government that will restore belief that government feels for them. Because in another 5-10 years, these are the people that will take over this country. And we must prepare the foundation for them to successfully succeed us. We thought we were young, now we are getting old. Our children are challenging us at home. And with this development, information about Nigeria has gone even more global. People that ordinarily were not interested, not even Nigerians, those who are just fans of the country, are getting to now read so much on Twitter under the virtual private network option than they would ordinarily be interested in. So the country is in the eye of the world, and the information and the image you should project now should be constructive and positive. And that probably is the opportunity in what has happened.
Is that okay? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. Look, there's a, the memo that was circulating from the National Broadcasting Commission to broadcast houses about the suspension of suspending their Twitter handles, and the second paragraph, they say, in compliance with the above directive, broadcasting stations are hereby advised to deinstall Twitter handles and desist from using Twitter as a source of information gathering for news and program presentation, especially phone-in. Section 2, Sub 1R of the NBC Act entrusts the Commission with responsibility to ensure strict adherence to the national laws, rules, and regulation, and it just goes on. Is this within the laws of this country for this to happen?
Thank you for asking that question. In fact, it's evident that while the Minister of Information is himself an accomplished lawyer, the pool of politics has beclouded the handling of this matter. What they have done is what is called in law prior restraint of information. You are preventing, it is not Twitter you are preventing from expressing their right. It is the individual who has the right of freedom of expression that you are preventing from exercising their right when you give this kind of directive. The only instance, there are instances where this can be justified. And this started as far back as 1971 in US. New York Times or United States case of the Pentagon paper. And this was where Supreme Court of the US had to come down on the principle of proportionality, the rule of clear and present danger, which allows the state, through the court, to prevent certain information from being distributed to the public on grounds of either national security or public morality. But the test and the body of establishing that is justifiable is on the state. So usually what should happen is you approach the court and indicate to the court that this information is about to be released to the public and it is injurious to the health of the state and security. The court authorizes you to then pass that directive, which all media organizations can comply with. But you must first justify it. What we have done is to reverse the order. In fact, not even reverse it, to create a parallel regulation and regime. Don't forget, and people must be clear, it's unfortunate that President Buhari is being made to reintroduce the mindset that led to problem for his regime in 1984. Decree 4, if you remember. That Decree 4 is the equivalent of what the Minister of Information has done now, which prevents the publication of information that embarrasses people in government, even if they are true. You remember the Guardian duo that had to be jailed for publishing what indeed was actually true, but because it embarrassed government. It's the same thing they are doing now, even without the backing of a law. So the only laws I know today that allows this kind of restriction is either you go under the Cyber Crimes Act Anti-Terrorism Act or the General Criminal Code. Outside of this, you need to get a new legislation. We attempted this 2 years ago, don't forget. There were 2 bills that were sponsored, the hate speech bill and the one on social media bill. These 2 bills failed to pass in National Assembly. What the Minister of Information is actually doing through NBC now is to implement a law that has not been enacted. Those 2 laws will have made it possible to do this. Even then, in those provisions that did not pass through, there was a requirement, a rigorous requirement to satisfy before you can restrict access of the public to social media and public broadcast media to express their views. So I believe that directive of NBC is ultra vires their authority. And in order not to create a state of anarchy, some public interest litigators should challenge it in court. I know it's difficult for broadcast houses who are subject to a regulation to challenge them, but other interest groups can actually challenge that directive. And that way, probably the law would get some clarification. But certainly, I have my strong view that directive of NBC is not defensible, either on grounds of national security or not public morality. To say that my brother who is in a village and has little access to telecoms by way of Twitter should not be heard on Channel television when he cannot travel all the way to Lagos or Abuja, where Channel is to deprive him the right of freedom of expression. And you are doing that before you even know what he's coming to say. Not that you already know that what he's coming to say is likely to breach national security. You are preempting his expression of his views. And that is contrary to Section 39 of the Constitution that guarantees freedom of expression and impartition of opinions and ideas.
Very interesting perspectives, even though lots of people are already saying, wow, that they don't mind having you back. But we have to thank you very much indeed for coming on this morning, Mr. Abiodun Owonikoko, Senior Advocate of Nigeria.
It's always my pleasure. Have a nice day, sir.
All right. Well, back in a moment, we'll still have another matter here, so don't go away. Welcome, Mark. Well, yeah, we're talking security again, and Dr. Ona Ekomu joins us. He is a strategic security consultant. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today on the program. Well, it appears as though 1 week, one trouble, many challenges that the country is faced. Well, yet again, it's Agatu, and the Daily is reporting 40 killed in fresh attack. And we were just talking about what happened in Igongo the other day, and then this one. But, you know, for those who are just maybe not having any security background, several theories, wild theories, go through their minds, which could inform the subsequent actions, which may not end up well for the polity. But for you, with your background and mindset about security, what's your impression about what's going on here?
Thank you very much. I won't try to second guess the motives of the aggressors, the attackers. Mr. Autumn of Benue State has said a lot about what he thinks is happening there. He has theorized that there's a land grab going on. There's an effort to intimidate members of the communities to abandon their communities to perhaps these so-called foreign invaders that we saw attack a Gongon community, like you just mentioned in your remarks, and so on and so forth. I think what is happening here is that we have a sustained threat environment. We have a sustained threat environment. Normally, when we speak in security, we look at the risks, that is probability of occurrence. But now we're no longer looking at risk because we know it will happen today, it will happen again, it will happen again. Agatu has been in the news for so long for the wrong reasons. It's been attacked over and over, Gwe West. In fact, the whole of Benue State is under siege, as it were. And so I would say that it is time for us to look at protective measures. We say in security, right now, we need to focus on the threat matrix, no longer on the risk assessments. Let's focus on the threat message because we know it's going to happen. So the question is, who are the aggressors? How many of them are coming? Because that you can learn that from their MOs, from their modus operandi. How many of them are coming? Then what are the rings of security? That's what are the circles of security you have around your assets? Assets now being the people in Benue State, the people of Benue State, the people of Agatu, the whole community, whatever you call that community, the land, their little huts, whatever it is, their homesteads. You know, this is what we ought to now focus on. Now, who is going to do this focusing? I have said this practice or this tendency to say federal government, President Buhari, I don't know who else is there in federal government, Mr. Lawan, Senate President, the Chief of Defense Staff, General Irabo, now the new Chief of Army Staff, Yahya. This is not really security. Security is built from ground up, not from up down. So the community leaders must rise up now to protect their domains. Now, the question, of course, everybody will quickly say, Dr. Ona, what are you saying? How do they protect their domains when they don't have arms? Of course, they have so many. They have a lot at their disposal. First of all, we look at I already said, please, Mr. Chamberlain, get my argument. I said we are in a threat status right now. We are only looking at the threat matrix. And the threat matrix, typical threat matrix will say intention, motivation, and capability. Okay? Now, we've already identified that the threats, the aggressors, that's the header, militia, whatever you want to call them. Sometimes they call them bandits. I don't think those are bandits because I don't want to conflate them. Bandits are operating in the Northwest. Those are the guys terrorizing Zamfara, Katsina, Sokoto. Let's leave them to be terrorizing those guys. But let's come to the Middle Belt, that is to Benue, where you are focusing today. These are header militias operating here. We know that. How do we know? From arrest records. We know from even fatality records on the side of the enemies. So, having said that, what is it that we need to do here? We need to set up tripwires. Well, I've said tripwire, and then somebody said, Dr. Ona, don't trip on your wire. I said, no, I'm not going to trip. Tripwire is just an intelligence concept where you have something further down the street to indicate. Now, they said, let's look at this attack on Agatu. They said, these are militias that are operating in Nasarawa State. Now, first, certainly, Governor Sule and his people in Nasarawa, they have a problem. They shouldn't be keeping militias in their state. I mean, not they are keeping them, but they shouldn't have them. They should attempt to flush them out. However they're going to do that, that's their problem. But let's focus on Benue. Now, they said they came through Gua West, and then they came into Agatu LGA. So what is that? There's penetration. They have penetrated. And so, but what is the attempt to detect them? Because every attacker, every threat has some kind of a pre-attack recce that they conduct. So who detected the recce? There was no detection. Now, what is the counter of that incursion that is coming in? So that is where community, Benue has a lot of very vibrant youths. Now, these young people, again, back to our community leaders, these young people need to be organized in some kind of a fashion to provide information. You know, these guys are not spirits. They didn't just disappear and show up in Agatu. They came through Gua West, for goodness sake. Who informed the community leaders in Agatu or anywhere else? Why does Mr. Autumn not have a command and control center in Makurdi? That's what he needs to do. He should set up something like that so that if there's any threat of that nature, it will be transmitted to Makurdi, and Makurdi will relay to all surrounding areas based on the direction of travel. He can now say, look, expect an attack from some bastards riding on motorbikes and what have you. You know, look, we need to get a security architecture that works. It's not about looking at Mr. Buhari or looking at whoever is at the federal level. The Benue governor ought to stand up along with his community leaders. Now, let them stand up and defend their communities. Nobody's going to defend it for you, for goodness sake.
You know, we don't know what exactly he's got. He's not and doesn't have, because I mean, from you're speaking from the results of what has happened. But is your suggestion akin to what we saw and how the some of the assailants were engaged and some of them were eventually neutralized in Igangan the other day?
That's a beautiful concept. That means they are not invincible. You see, Igogo will have taken a heavy hit, but what happened here? Amotekun, local vigilance. You know, so this is it. That's your answer. If you are waiting on federal resources to come and solve your local problems, you will wait, and all of you will die before the resources get there. They just don't have enough of them, and they are not mobile enough. We don't have to go after these guys. That is why the bandits are roaming free in the Northwest. We don't have attack helicopters. That's why ISWAP is ruling communities in the Northeast. You know, so we don't have a lot of platforms, military platforms. We are still in a conventional mindset, conventional material, that is in terms of equipment. In terms of our battle, our guys are gallant. They are doing well. I love them. I pray for them every night when I go to bed and in the morning when I wake up. But, you know, the point here is the local communities, let us stop being, I don't know how to call it, let's stop being rulers. Let's start being leaders. Let us put our heart into the welfare of our people. Let us worry about what's happening with our people. We need to look at unity of command. Within, again, let me go back to the case study you gave me, Benue State. Go back, what is the unity of command and control structure in terms of state security? I'm talking about state security, that is the security architecture of Benue State itself, which is of Governor Otom. Now, beyond that, how are we relating? What do we look? Okay, let me just give you a simple historical example, sir, that we just put this in context. And I think you and I have discussed this before. The 10-year dirty war in Algeria, how do you think it was won? It was won by the Patriots. Who are the Patriots? These are just regular guys who were deputized. They had the regular Algerian army and all that, but you had these regular guys who were deputized with ordinary chakabulas, what do we call it, den guns, and who control the countryside. Listen, these bad guys are not coming to attack Mukodi frontally. They won't. They will be killed. So what do? They attack isolated, isolated rural areas. So that's what it is. You know, so you now have to design a security infrastructure or a security architecture that takes care of that rural area. Then what's the infrastructure you have? Where are the people? How are they arranged? What is their role? People have to think security in this country. I don't care whether you say it's invaders from Futajalon or wherever. You know, they're invading this country, for goodness sake. And we must defend this country. You know, this is it's so simplistic. I can't understand why we don't understand it.
Well, there's something you said earlier, Dr. Homo. Two things that I would like you to find a way to bridge for us. First of all, you talked about the need for us to focus on the threats as opposed to waiting for something to happen. That's the way it sounds. And then you also talked about the need for us to build security from the ground up, not from the top down. That suggests that there is a way we need to engage the people. So how do we do that? You've also mentioned over and over again here now that there is a need for the people, for us to protect the people and all of that. So there needs to help us find a marriage here of that threats, tackling it from the threat as opposed to the attack. In other words, being proactive as opposed to being reactive. At least that's the way it sounds to me. And then speak to the idea of building the security from ground up as opposed to from top down. How do we go about it?
Mr. Makinde, that's a beautiful question. I love it. You see, we need to, so I am saying, let us stop thinking conventional. Conventional means we are looking from outside in. That is how that's why we always call on the federal resources. Where's the federal government? Where's Mr. Buhari? I am saying, let's do an outward-facing infrastructure. Let us build a dynamic and outward-facing security. So how does that work? First of all, it's our community that is under attack. The local communities, they are under attack. Okay, right now, we know that. That's well established. I'm sure that even though you are very loyally your presentations, you would not disagree with that. Now, I think secondly, sir, that we need to adopt what we call hunter mentality. What is happening here? This is an asymmetric attack. Look at the attack in Agatu. They came 5:45. By 6:45, they were done and they were gone. So what does that tell you? It's asymmetrical. They don't pick a time. Look at what they did in Igongo. They went to Igongo, and that was a midnight attack. Okay, but thank God the Igongo guys were waiting. They were laying in wait for that attack. So that also shows that these regional and local security apparatus, they work. They really do work. Because if you were waiting for troops to come from Abuja, or where is the closer place, from Ibadan, a second div to come and save them, they will have all been slaughtered before they got there. It was the capability on ground. It was repelling that attack that discouraged them. That's called deterrence. Another concept in security, deterrence. So they were, first they detected them. Certainly there was some kind of a local tripwire. They protected, they defended, and that deterred them, and they went back. So they took some casualties. At least now we have some bodies that we can analyze. So they are no longer UGM, unknown gunmen. We now know some of the gunmen who were down. So that is beautiful. So that's what I'm saying. So to answer your question, sir, I'm saying let us do an outward-facing security infrastructure from the community out. The community becomes the hunter of the attackers. Remember, they are coming to attack us, but we are not going to go and attack them. We will stay, and when they come, we can, to use Nigerian military parlance, neutralize them, or at least confront them, or even just move our women, because now, this is another thing, they are killing our women and children. Let's move our women to unthreatened areas. That's also a beautiful concept there. So I don't think we are so helpless and we are so powerless. I think it's just because we are not thinking about what is the right thing to do. And that's why it appears so difficult for us, sir.
Let me see if we can wind down on this and ask maybe a question that has been asked too many times and that is always being asked when we get stories, reports of these attacks. And it's simple. Why? I mean, for Boko Haram that started over a decade ago, I mean, we could put our fingers on why, I mean, what the mission of Boko Haram is against Western education and all that. But for these attacks that we're seeing, either by the, in fact, let me just focus on the ones we've seen in Agatu and Igongo, call them herdsmen, militia, gunmen, bandits, or whatever. But the simple question of why, how is it hard that we've not been able to come together and say, this is what we're fighting, this is what they're trying to achieve? And I mean, at the different levels. Why is it hard to get that why?
Thank you very much, sir. Well, I think perhaps because the why is looking at us in the face. There's been a lot of discussion in the country about why these attacks are taking place. It's been said that the land in Benue is very fertile, produces good grazing opportunities. And then it also says that we have a situation where it appears the area is undefended. Where I don't want to go because I'm blaming the victim now. I don't want to go there. But I think because also, let me just focus on it. The people have need for that land. Let's put it that way. They need the land. They need to graze their animal. Communities where they have been pushed back against the grazing, they need to punish those communities. Which is the concept of bringing in the militia. So you see, I have no problem with herdsmen. Herdsmen are good, cattle is good, beef is good, but I have problem with header militia, people who want to kill others for whatever reason. There is no dispute between a visitor and the landlord that cannot be settled. It can be settled, but it depends on how you want to settle it. I can bring out a gun and shoot the landlord, and that's one way to settle it, but that's illegal. And so we are saying that that's that one. But now the real reason, the real why, Mr. Yolu, is the impunity. They can do it and get away with it. So that's why I'm saying, let us change our security architecture. Because right now, it's clearly with impunity. You can do it with great freedom. You do it and you get away with it. And some lazy policymaker, I don't know who to call them, will say, oh, it's some UGM. It's an unknown gunman. Well, it's like unknown soldier. So what do? You just leave it. It's an act of God. And after 2 days, Nigerians are hungry. They will move on with their lives. But, you know, when you start making the UGM pay, he will say, these people, they are too serious here. He will move somewhere else. So let's move the threat next door. That's always our goal in security. We never say we are going to defend the whole. That's why it's better to do a community-based security architecture. You're not trying to defend the whole country. That's the work of the Nigerian police and the Nigerian military. You defend your own local community. They will go to the next community. Now, if those guys borrow from your book, it's like what's happening around the country now. Amotekun is becoming a success model. And I believe you and I and Makinde, we discussed this many years ago, some time ago when they started the Baba Amotekun. You know, when this one has become very popular, and you're going to see it's going to be adopted elsewhere, you know, because the threat appears to be the same. So let us focus on the threats. Let's focus on the threats. Right now, I'm no longer interested in focusing on the politics because this thing is going to tear us apart. But we're not even interested in that. I'm saying defend your community. That's the important thing right here and right now.
And it's a very important important area to live in. And I think subsequently, those are some of the things that we need to focus on moving forward. Because, I mean, they say, if you want to make anybody do anything, make it easy for them to do it. So defending your little space will just amount to much if it's put together. We do thank you very much indeed for your perspective this morning, Dr. Onah Ikomo, Strategic Security Consultant.
Thank you, Mr. Chamberlain, for having me.
All right, well, we got tons of mails now, don't we? Yeah, we're going to start taking a look at all of them as much as we can, actually. Let's start with this one from Ikenna Mbele, who says, I'm a youth. I'm willing to sit with government to talk things out. I'm willing to serve in the interest of peace to national development. I speak the mind of over 80 million youths in Nigeria. We must, as the future of this nation, be given the platform to form the future we wish to hand over to our children. You've done yours, and doing ours.
Barnabas Oluwale tweets, or rather, sends this mail on Twitter ban. It's hard to really...
it's social media, it's understandable.
It's hard to get used to that now. Well, you see, peaceful coexistence campaign, which has become a long-time subject of debate in Nigeria. Certainly, I'm not agitating for war, neither am I in support of those calling for it. However, the truth remains that the government takes advantage of this to further enslave the masses. Those at the helms of affairs have to be very careful. I mean, very, very careful about this.
Well, Demola Alalade says the Nigerian government should do the needful by lifting the ban on Twitter. It's a suspension. It's just note that in the interest of many Nigerians that use the platform to either make a living or communicate their feelings, which also helps government to formulate policies. This needs to be done as quickly as possible to prevent the matter from degenerating into what the Nigerian government won't be able to handle.
Professor Enakena has this one to say. He says, last week, France fined Google 190 million euros for abusing its market dominance to sell online ads after complaints by media companies. We must make these social media companies to have corporate responsibility by registering officially and paying taxes and their corporate guidelines for its operations in Nigeria.
Well, we've got Harry on one. We'll never say die. He found our email accounts. He says, the Holy Scripture warns, do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers in the household of democracy, which Nigeria chose through a bloody struggle in 1999, and for which it will celebrate with a public holiday on June 12th. The country should avoid being in the company of countries whose actions mock democracy. He mentions North Korea, Myanmar, and Afghanistan. 2023 will decide if we're moving forward or back to the abyss. Whoa.
Well, Oluwadamilola Ayinde is next with this mail. Says it's easier to spread false news on WhatsApp compared to Twitter. Interesting. Fake news can be reported on Twitter, and the post can be flagged, and the content can be taken down from Twitter by Twitter. But this cannot be done on WhatsApp. So more orientation needs to be done on educating people on how to flag fake news on Twitter, not placing a ban on Twitter.
Well,
he ends by saying we have a long way to go.
Is he inadvertently advising something be done about WhatsApp?
Well, if we do that, then we have to do it about text messages as well. Olabode Ajibola says, transfer of aggression using public offices to oppress enemies in a democratic system of government should have a limit, most especially those that don't have a legal backing, because this is a sign of disrespect to the rule of law.
Nicholas KK has this one. He says, I want to ask a question. Is Nigeria the first country to ban Twitter? I assume that his question is rhetorical. He says, in fact, India just issued Twitter last warning and gave it rules and guidelines if it must operate in India.
Well, Kende says, Nigerian government banning Twitter is uncalled for and something should be done immediately. Okay.
And Silas Onu has this one. He says, what we need is a return to the 1963 Constitution and extinguish this presidential system for being capable of elevating an individual above our laws. Okay, I don't know which individual is elevated above our laws, because we're supposed to be all equal before the law. But hey, I mean, I'm not a lawyer. What do I know? We'll have to leave it here. Thank you so much for being a part of today's program. Thank you for flooding our emails. We'll expect the same thing tomorrow. Yes, please do not be silent. The fact that there is a ban, we've been told there's a temporary ban on Twitter, doesn't mean that our freedom of expression should be curtailed. So as much as possible, use as many other avenues as you can find to get your voices heard. And we will take them all, as many as we can. Thank you for watching. I'm Maokwe Ogunyusu.
I'm Kayode Okikiolu.
I'm Ayo Makinde. Have a wonderful day.
I'm Train Belunaso. We'll see you next time.
The following